Friday, October 13th, 1307. It's dawn, and across France, in a single coordinated operation, royal soldiers simultaneously raid every Knights Templar commandery, fortress, and estate in the kingdom. In Paris, the Grand Master of the Order, Jacques de Molay, is dragged from his bed in the Temple fortress. In provinces across France, hundreds of Templar knights are arrested in their sleep. This isn't a military campaign. There's no battle, no siege, no warning. It's a police action, executed with precision that would make modern intelligence agencies jealous. Within hours, the most powerful military order in Christendom, warriors who fought in the Crusades, bankers who financed kings, an organization that answered only to the Pope, is decapitated. The charges? Heresy, blasphemy, worshipping a demonic head called Baphomet, spitting on the cross, homosexual rituals, and within 7 years, the order will be dissolved. Its Grand Master burned at the stake, its wealth seized, its name erased from official history. For centuries, the story has been told as religious persecution, a tragic misunderstanding, overzealous inquisitors hunting heretics. But today, we're going to show you what really happened, because this wasn't about heresy. It wasn't about protecting Christianity. It was about money, specifically the largest debt default in medieval history, executed by a bankrupt king who owed the Templars a fortune he could never repay. The Knights Templar weren't betrayed because of what they believed. They were betrayed because they were the bank, and their biggest debtor was the King of France. Welcome back to Hidden Forces in History. I'm your host, Jeremy Ryan Slate, the CEO of Command Your Brand. We help our clients to appear on some of the biggest podcasts in the world. Check us out via the link in the description. Don't forget to like this video, leave us a comment, and smash that subscribe button if you want more Hidden Forces in History. And now, our story. To understand why the Templars were destroyed, you first need to understand what they became. The Knights Templar were founded in 1119 in Jerusalem, right after the First Crusade. Their original mission was to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. 9 knights, a small religious military order, living in quarters on the Temple Mount, hence the name Templars. The Catholic Church loved them. In 1129, Pope Honorius II officially recognized the order. In 1139, Pope Innocent II issued a papal bull, Omne Datum Omnium, which gave the Templars extraordinary privileges. The Templars held a truly unique and powerful position. They answered solely to the Pope, meaning no king, no local bishop, and no regional authority could command them. Furthermore, they enjoyed complete tax exemption, allowing them to move and operate across all of Europe without the burden of paying tithes or duties. In war, every single spoil they captured from the Muslims, be it wealth, land, or goods, was theirs to keep. This incredible independence was further cemented by their right to build their own churches and solicit their own substantial donations. This wasn't just religious approval, it was a corporate charter with tax-exempt status, legal immunity, and a monopoly on holy war profits. Over the next 150 years, the Templars evolved from a small military order into something unprecedented, a multinational financial institution with its own army. And here's how it worked. The Crusades made them rich. Every time European nobles went on crusade, well, they needed financing. The Templars provided it. Loans, equipment, transportation. When the Crusaders died, which usually happened constantly, their estates often went to the Templars. They invented international banking. Pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem faced a problem. Carrying gold across thousands of miles meant getting robbed. The Templars created the first letters of credit. Deposit money at a Templar house in Paris, get a coded document, and withdraw the equivalent in Jerusalem. It's like a medieval wire transfer. They became Europe's vault. Kings, nobles, and merchants stored their wealth in Templar fortresses, the most secure buildings in Europe. The Templars charged fees and invested the deposits. They acquired vast real estate. Through donations, purchases, and foreclosures, the Templars accumulated estates across Europe. Farms, vineyards, mills, entire villages. By 1300, they owned approximately 9,000 properties across Christendom. By the late 13th century, the Knights Templar had become an entity of immense power. They were one of the wealthiest institutions in all of Europe, serving as their primary bankers to both kings and popes. Their strength wasn't purely financial. They commanded a formidable military force with fortresses spanning the Mediterranean. Perhaps most dangerously, they were a unique tax-exempt organization that enjoyed legal immunity, answering to no secular authority but their own. They were too big to fail, until they weren't. And here's the hidden force that doomed the Templars: creditor risk. When you're a big bank, your biggest vulnerability isn't robbery or war. It's borrowers who can't or won't repay. And by 1300, the Templars' biggest borrower was King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair. He had a problem. Well, he was broke. Philip IV of France was always in need of funds. He drained his royal treasury with a series of expensive conflicts. He'd fought a costly war against England and Flanders from 1294 to 1298, and put down rebellious French nobles and financed constant military campaigns that left his coffers empty. Medieval kings struggled to raise money. Their options were severely limited. They could tax their subjects, which, more often than not, led to open rebellion. They could debase their currency, a tactic that Philip IV used so often. It earned him the moniker the Counterfeit King. Or perhaps most tempting, they could simply borrow the money they needed from the immensely wealthy Templars. Philip did all three, but by 1307 he owed the Templars enormous sums. The exact amounts are disputed, but contemporary sources suggest hundreds of thousands of livres, equivalent to years of royal revenue. The Templars weren't just his creditors, they were his bankers. The royal treasury was literally housed in the Paris Temple. Templar financial officers managed the king's accounts. They created a dangerous dynamic. The Templars knew exactly how broke Philip was. They knew he couldn't repay. They had leverage over the King of France. And Philip knew something else. The Templars were vulnerable. Why? Well, because by the 1300s, the Crusades were over. The last Crusader stronghold, Acre, fell into Muslim hands in 1291. The Templars' original mission, defending the Holy Land, was finished. European public opinion was rapidly turning against the Templars. The common man was asking, why do these warrior monks still exist if there is no Holy Land left for them to defend? Why are they so incredibly rich, seemingly doing nothing of value? And perhaps most dangerously, why do they answer to no one but themselves? The Templars had become what modern corporations fear: too powerful, too wealthy, and losing public legitimacy. Philip saw an opportunity: the destruction of the Knights Templar. By seizing their wealth, he could eliminate his crippling debts, confiscate their vast estates, and finally refill his depleted treasury. Perhaps most importantly, it would allow him to remove a powerful center of influence that had fundamentally rivaled his own royal authority. All he needed was legal pretext. And in medieval Europe, there was one charge that could destroy anyone: heresy. Philip begins building his case against the Templars. His chief architect is Guillaume de Nogaret, the king's chancellor, a lawyer, and one of the most ruthless political operators in medieval Europe. Nogaret had already proven his willingness to do anything for Philip. In 1303, he led a military raid on Pope Boniface VIII at Anagni, physically attacking the Pope to force him back down from challenging Philip's authority. Boniface died shortly after from the shock. Now, Nogaret returns his attention to the Templars. The problem is, how do you destroy an organization protected by the Pope? The solution? find a scandal so explosive that the Pope has no choice but to act. Nogaret begins collecting evidence and expelled the Templars. Every organization has disgruntled former members. Nogaret finds Templars who were kicked out of the order for misconduct. He offers them deals, testify against the order, and you'll be pardoned and rewarded. The primary source of these explosive allegations against the Templars came from a highly dubious individual, Jacques de Molay. Fleuron, a former member of the order, was already imprisoned on a murder charge when he was brought before Nogaret. To save his own skin, Fleuron provided a detailed list of horrifying accusations. He claimed that during their secret initiation, the Templars were forced to deny Christ and spit upon the cross. Furthermore, he alleged that a central part of their dark ritual involved the worship of an idol called Baphomet, and that they commonly engaged in homosexual acts. Are these accusations true? Well, almost certainly not, but they don't need to be true. They need to be believable and shocking. The sheer genius of the accusations leveled against the Templars wasn't in their truth, but in their precision. These weren't random accusations. They were specifically designed to hit every major emotional and religious trigger in the medieval mind. By alleging that the knights were denying Christ, Philip the Fair was accusing them of heresy, the ultimate religious crime. Claiming they spat on the cross was an act of profound blasphemy, viscerally offensive to every Christian. The charge of worshiping idols painted them as pagans, which was exactly what the Crusader movement was founded to fight against. And finally, the accusations of homosexual acts, sodomy, framed their activities as both a mortal sin and a capital crime. Every charge was a masterstroke of mental warfare. Each charge is calculated to make the Templars seem like the opposite of what they claim to be. Not holy warriors, but secret heretics hiding behind Christian symbols. Nogaret compiles dossiers. He briefs Philip, and they wait for the right moment. And then they get a gift, a new pope. Boniface VIII is dead, thanks partly to Nogaret's attack. And after a brief successor, the College of Cardinals elects a Frenchman, Bertrand de Go, who becomes Pope Clement V. This is exactly what Philip needs. Clement isn't based in Rome. He's based in Avignon in southern France, essentially under Philip's influence. He's politically weak, personally indecisive, and deeply indebted to Philip for supporting his election. Philip immediately begins pressuring Clement about the Templars. But Clement resists. The Templars are a papal order. They answer directly to the Pope. Destroying them without evidence would undermine papal authority and set a dangerous precedent. So Philip forces his hand. On September 14, 1307, Philip sends secret orders to his officials across France, sealed instructions not to be opened until October 12th. The orders were explicit and delivered with grim finality. At dawn on the 13th of October, every single Templar must be arrested simultaneously. Not only that, but every piece of Templar property was to be immediately seized and every document and treasure secured. Once the arrests were made, the interrogations were to begin without delay. Philip doesn't ask the Pope's permission. He doesn't wait for a church trial. He acts unilaterally, a secular king arresting a religious order that's supposed to be immune from secular authority. This is a constitutional crisis in medieval terms. But Philip has calculated correctly. Once the arrests happen, once the accusations are public, and once confessions start coming in, through torture of course, Clement will have no choice but to go along with it. On October 13th, 1307, a Friday, the operation executes flawlessly. Across France, Templars are arrested. In Paris alone, 138 Templars are seized, including Grand Master Jacques de Molay. The charges are read publicly. Heresy, blasphemy, idol worship, sodomy. The propaganda campaign begins immediately. 2 town criers announce the arrests. Preachers denounce the Templars from the pulpit, and pamphlets circulate with lurid details of the supposed rituals. And then the torture starts. Medieval torture wasn't a random brutality. It was a legal procedure with specific rules, designed to extract confessions that could be used in court. The French Inquisition, working on Philip's orders, employed standard techniques. Strappado. The victim's hands are tied behind their back and attached to a rope and then hoisted into the air, dislocating their shoulders. The rack. The victim is stretched on a frame until joints separate. Foot roasting. Feet are placed near a fire until the flesh burns. And sleep deprivation. Prisoners are kept awake for days until they hallucinate. The rules stated that torture could only be used if there was already evidence of guilt. But Philip's inquisitors interpreted evidence quite broadly. The accusation from expelled Templars counted. Within weeks, confessions pour in. Jacques de Molay himself confesses. The Grand Master, the leader of the entire order, admits to denying Christ during his initiation ceremony 42 years earlier. Other Templars confess to spitting on the cross, to homosexual acts, to worshiping a mysterious head called Baphomet. The confessions are recorded by scribes, witnessed by officials, and sealed with legal authority. Philip has what he needs: documented admissions of heresy from the Templars themselves. But here's what the confessions actually prove. People will say anything to make torture stop. Modern analysis of the trial records exposes a clear pattern of coerced and unreliable testimony. The descriptions given by the accused Templars were widely inconsistent, particularly concerning the so-called idol Baphomet. Some claim it was a head, others insisted it was a cat, and many simply had no idea what it was supposed to be. Furthermore, the confessions themselves proved highly unstable. As soon as the torture stopped, many retracted their statements, only to reconfess the moment the torture resumed. Tellingly, Templars arrested outside of France, where King Philip IV was unable to control the legal process, largely refused to confess to charges. In England, where torture was less systematic, almost no Templars confessed. In Aragon, the king refused to arrest Templars without papal orders, and investigators found no evidence of heresy. In Cyprus, the Templars were investigated and cleared. The evidence only existed where Philip's inquisitors controlled the process. But by now, the propaganda machine is running at full speed. Pope Clement V is trapped. On one hand, the Templars are his order. They answer to the Pope and not to kings. If he allows Philip to destroy them without resistance, well, he's admitting that secular rulers can override papal authority. On the other hand, the confessions are public, and the accusations themselves are explosive. If Clement defends the Templars and they're proven later guilty, he'll be accused of protecting heretics. Plus, Philip is threatening him, not subtly. Philip's agents made sure Pope Clement understood the stakes. The king held powerful leverage. They reminded Clement that Philip could revive the devastating charges of heresy against the late Pope Boniface VIII, the very charges Novgorod had championed, and try him even in death. Furthermore, the agents subtly hinted at an investigation into Clement's own election, suggesting it might be tainted by simony. Most practically, they warned that the flow of French financial support, which the papacy desperately relied on, could be cut off. Clement tries to walk a middle path. November 1307, he issues the papal bull, Pastoralis Praemunitae, ordering all Christian monarchs to arrest Templars and seize their property, but specifying that they should be held for the church investigation, not royal courts. This is Clement trying to reclaim control of the process. But it's too late. Philip has already set the narrative. The years between 1307 and 1312 saw a grinding legal process unfold. Papal commissions traveled across Europe, investigating the captured Templars. Meanwhile, some of the knights began to recount their earlier confessions, declaring they had only spoken under torture. King Philip, ever the aggressor, threatened to convene a church council to depose Clement V if he refused to dissolve the order. Clement, however, desperately stalled, hoping to somehow achieve a compromise. But Philip has one more card to play. public pressure. He convenes the Estates General, a gathering of French nobility, clergy, and commoners, and presents the evidence against the Templars. He stages it as a public relations campaign. He says, "Look at these heretics the king has exposed." The message is clear to Clement. French public opinion supports Philip. If Clement defends the Templars, he'll be seen as protecting heretics against a righteous king. Finally, in 1312, at the Council of Vienne, Clement caves. He issues the papal bull Vox in Excelso, officially dissolving the Knights Templar, not because they were proven guilty, but because their reputation was so damaged that the order could no longer function. It's a masterpiece of political language. Clement doesn't say the Templars are guilty. He says the accusations have made them useless. So he's dissolving them for the good of the church. The Templar properties, well, they're officially transferred to the Knights Hospitaller, another military order. But in France, Philip seizes everything first and never fully hands it over. The greatest debt default in medieval history is complete. On March 18, 1314, in Paris, Jacques de Molay, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, now 70 years old, is brought before a crowd to hear his final sentence. He's been imprisoned for 7 years, tortured, and forced to confess, paraded as proof of Templar heresy. The sentence is life imprisonment. This is the deal. Confess, accept guilt, and you'll live your days out in a cell. It's over. But as the charges are read publicly, something unexpected happens. Jacques de Molay speaks. He retracts his confession. In front of the crowd, the royal officials, the church authorities, he declares the following: "I confess that I am guilty of the greatest infamy, but the infamy is that I lied. I said that the order was guilty when it was innocent. I testified against it under torture. The order is pure. The accusations are false." Another Templar, Geoffrey de Charnay, preceptor of Normandy, stands with him and recants as well. The crowd is stunned. The officials are furious. Under medieval law, a relapsed heretic, someone who confesses, recants, and then confesses again, is automatically condemned to death by burning. Philip doesn't wait for church approval. That same day, he orders both men burned at the stake. By evening, on a small island in the Seine, stakes are erected. Jacques de Molay and Geoffrey de Charnay are tied to posts. The wood is piled around them, torches are lit, and contemporary accounts say that as the flames rose, de Molay shouted a curse. God knows who is wrong and who has sinned. Soon a calamity will occur to those who have condemned us to death without a reason. God will avenge our death. Then he called out to Pope Clement and King Philip, summoning them to appear before God's judgment within a year. The flames consumed them. Then something strange happened. On April 20th, 1314, 1 month after de Molay's execution, Pope Clement V dies suddenly at the age of 58. The official cause is listed as illness, but the timing is striking. On November 29th, 1314, 8 months after the execution, Philip IV dies at the age of 46. He suffers a stroke while hunting, falls from his horse, and dies within weeks. Both men dead within a year of de Molay's curse. Medieval Europe is electrified. This can't be coincidence. It's divine judgment. But the real curse isn't supernatural. It's political. Following Philip's reign, his 3 sons took the throne in quick succession. First came Louis X, who only managed to hold the crown for 2 years until 1316. He was succeeded by Philip V, who reigned for 6 years until 1322. Finally, Charles IV took the throne, reigning for 6 years until 1328. None of them produced male heirs who survived to adulthood. The direct Capetian line, which had ruled France for 300 years, goes extinct. This triggers the succession crisis which leads to the 100 Years' War between France and England, one of the most devastating conflicts in medieval history. Did the Templar curse cause this? Of course not. But Philip's destruction of the Templars triggered a profound crisis of legitimacy throughout Europe. In his quest for power and wealth, he had not only violated the long-held tradition of church immunity, but had also gone so far as to torture and execute members of an order that answered directly to the Pope. Moreover, he seized their vast property holdings using what everyone recognized as blatant legal fiction. Through Philip's actions, a terrifying message was delivered to sacred institutions. Royal power now stood alone above them, capable of overriding even the most hallowed traditions. When his line died out and succession became contested, his actions had already weakened the moral authority of the French crown. The real curse was precedent. Power without legitimacy is fragile, and the Templar wealth, while the treasure Philip seized, it didn't save him. Most of it was already spent on the wars before he died. The French crown remained chronically broke, and Philip destroyed the Templars, eliminated his debts, seized their property, and gained nothing lasting from it. So let's be clear about what actually happened here. The Knights Templar were not destroyed because they were heretics. They were destroyed because they were creditors to a bankrupt king who had the power to eliminate them. Every element of the heresy case falls apart under scrutiny. The accusations were manufactured. They came from expelled members and prisoners offered deals. There was no independent evidence of Baphomet, idol worship, or ritual blasphemy ever found. The confessions were tortured. Templars outside of French control didn't confess. Confessions were retracted when the torture stopped, then re-extracted. The timing was financial. The arrest happened when Philip was at his most financially desperate, right after debasing the currency and expelling Jewish moneylenders. The pattern was systematic. This wasn't religious zeal. It was a coordinated operation planned months in advance, with military precision. This was a sovereign debt default disguised as religious persecution. And it worked because Philip understood something crucial about power. If you control the narrative, you can rewrite reality. He didn't just seize Templar wealth. He made it righteous to seize their wealth by branding them as heretics first. The hidden force here isn't religious fanaticism. It's propaganda used to justify a financial crime. But here's the question. How did the Templars let this happen? They were sophisticated, wealthy, and politically connected. They had fortresses across Europe and their own military force. Why didn't they see this coming? Well, the answer? They believed their immunity was real. For 200 years, the Templars had operated under papal protection. They'd survived conflicts with kings before this. They assumed that their status as a religious order made them untouchable. This is the classic mistake of powerful institutions, confusing legal protection with actual security. The Knights Templar had 3 fatal flaws that led to their downfall. Their first mistake was losing sight of their original mission. Once the crusades ended, these warrior monks had no war left to fight. Their purpose vanished, and they morphed into mere bankers and landlords. Their legitimacy was gone, yet they refused to adapt. Second, they were dangerously concentrated in France. Despite being an international order, their administrative heart and most of their valuable assets were located right in King Philip's territory. This concentration allowed him to decapitate the entire organization with a single swift strike. And finally, they placed too much faith in the system. They were convinced that papal authority would shield them. They never conceived that a king could simply disregard church law, round them up, and then force the pope to comply after the fact. In modern terms, they were the ultimate example of an institution that was too big to fail, until suddenly they weren't. The Templars had succumbed to the fate of all powerful institutions. They grew comfortable, complacent, and utterly convinced of their own permanence. They believed their vast wealth and the Pope's protection made them invincible. But Philip proved the cold, hard truth. If you owe someone enough money and you possess enough power, you don't play by the rules. You simply rewrite them. So why does the destruction of the Knights Templar matter 700 years later? Well, because the pattern repeats. Every few generations, we see the same dynamic. A powerful institution becomes a creditor to those in power. The debtors can't or won't repay, so they destroy the creditor and seize the assets. But they need legal or moral justification. In 1307, it was heresy. In other eras, the charges had been different, but the motivation, the same. They've called it a threat to national security, an issue of public interest, a danger of systematic risk, or even an economic emergency. The Templars weren't first, and they certainly weren't the last. In medieval Europe, Jewish moneylenders were repeatedly expelled and their assets seized by kings who owed them money. In the 1930s, government nationalized gold, confiscated assets, and rewrote contracts during the Depression. In the 2008 financial crisis, the too-big-to-fail banks were bailed out, but smaller creditors were wiped out through forced restructuring. The mechanics change and the justifications evolve, but the underlying dynamics remain. When the powerful owe too much money, they don't pay. They change the game. The downfall of the Knights Templar began with a series of fatal miscalculations. They operated under the mistaken belief that their legal protections were set in stone, that their immense wealth was a guarantee of security, and that their sacred, holy status would grant them immunity from worldwide threats. In the end, they learned the harshest lesson. The very system they trusted would not protect them. Philip IV showed them and history that none of these things would matter when the sovereign decides the rules no longer apply. The Templars' real sin wasn't heresy. It was being the bank when the king was broke. And that's a lesson that echoes through every financial crisis, every sovereign default, and every moment when power decides that debts are negotiable and institutions are disposable. The Friday the 13th, 1307 raids weren't about protecting Christianity. They were about protecting a king from his creditors. And the method, manufactured scandal, legal theater, confessions under torture, and propaganda campaigns became a template that's been used ever since. Next time you hear about an institution being destroyed for the public good, or assets being seized in the national interest, or powerful organizations dissolved because of sudden scandals, remember the Templars. And ask yourself this question: who owed the money? The hidden forces in history aren't always hidden. Sometimes they're just dressed up in language of morality and law. If you want to understand how power really works, subscribe and hit that bell, because we're digging into the evidence every single week. This has been Hidden Forces in History, and I'm Jeremy Ryan Slate.